Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. This is Krista here. I told you guys I will be seeing you basically every week in the month of May because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. For the month of May, I'm talking about all things mental health, Black mental health, and Brown mental health. What I like to call this is what's the 411 on Black and Brown mental health? This week, I've been focusing on finding a therapist, finding the right fit, finding a therapist that looks like you, and knowing how do you know if that's the person for you, right? And so tonight, I have the honor and the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Chanda Reynolds. We go way back, and so I'm super, super excited to be talking with her and giving you guys the 411 on this topic. So let's have her join us as we are talking about how to find a therapist.
Hey.
Hey, girl.
How are you?
I am doing well. I'm glad you asked me that. I am a little tired, if I have to be honest, but I'm doing
Be
well.
honest.
Listen, that's what we talk about, right? So let me ask you, how are you doing?
Exactly. I am tired, but I'm looking forward to the weekend. Like I think that this week has been really hard, but the weekend I feel like is definitely will be bright and sunny because it's bright and sunny now. So yeah, that's how I feel. But I like how you were honest though, because a lot of times we're conditioned to say, "Oh, I'm good, I'm all right," and then we don't really check in with ourselves.
I'm fine, and that's it.
Right.
And really, we be having a difficult time sometimes. So
yeah.
I remember when we did our live last year, and we talked about that a lot, like really checking in and being in tune with yourself. So
exactly,
I'm going to jump. Yes, I'm going to jump into this, Chanda, because I want the people to get the 411, right? And so, like I told you guys, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm giving you all things mental health. And so today we are going to be talking to Dr. Chanda Reynolds about different things of what to look for in a therapist and, you know, what are some things that are important to highlight or even stay away from. So the first question is I have for you, Chanda, is what's the importance of seeing a provider that looks like you?
Yeah, it's so important. I think it's one of those things that often goes overlooked for at least many years. I think now we're starting to get more cognizant and aware of the importance of it. But overall, like the research does indicate that when people of color, Black people, see a therapist that looks like them, they're more inclined to follow the treatment plan. They're more inclined to reap the benefits of therapy because a more trusting relationship is able to be established quicker. And so, you know, that's why I'm a firm believer in seeking a therapist who does look like you, who is also competent. Again, if you don't have one that looks like you, that's fine too. And we'll talk about that later, but it's very important. I think that this is something that we've been emphasizing a lot more over the past year or two, especially with everything happening in the country with, you know, the George Floyds and the Ahmaud Arbery's and, you know, all the deaths that we experience as a community. People started to really open up about needing a therapist and wanting to feel more comfortable in therapy. Therefore, a lot of them seek therapy from therapists who look like them.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about some of the reasons why. Now, I promote heavy. And if you haven't seen it, follow BBDT_directory and follow Krista.
Yes.
I promote that heavy. I promote it because there's so many benefits, like Dr. Chanda just said, right? In addition to a couple that you just said, Chanda, but people, you're more likely when you have that connection, like you were saying, with the person that's sitting across from you, you're also more likely to show up for your sessions and don't be getting those no-shows because we hate those.
Yeah.
Right? When that connection is formed, when you can look across from the person and you can feel like, wait, they identify, they get what I'm talking about, you know what I mean? You're feeling like, okay, I'm feeling comfortable. I'm feeling like this is a trusting environment. I want to stuff now.
Say that last part you just said.
I said, and so it makes them want to like work through what they came for in the first place when they feel that connection.
Yeah, so it's almost like it instills a sense of hope, right? So if you're sitting across from somebody who does look like you, you're more inclined to hear what they say. And again, going back to the research, like the research suggests when you are in conversation, not even just therapy, but in conversation with somebody who looks like you, whether that's the same skin color, same gender, like you're more inclined to believe what they're saying. You're more inclined to, their information that they're saying is more likely to resonate with you because of that, because of that compatibility factor. So I'm a firm believer in Black people having Black therapists.
Listen, sis, okay. Now I will say this. So for those of you who don't know, I created the Black Brown Delaware Therapist Directory this was one of the main. Thank you, sis, for you to find a provider that looks like you. Now, what I have been saying is, if you are not Black or brown, can you utilize the directory? You absolutely can. But like we just said, there's so many reasons of why that is beneficial. Now, if you, like Chanda was just saying, if you don't find a therapist for some reason, or if you don't want to find a therapist that looks like you, that is also okay, right? But when we enter the room, this is a healing space, right? This is a therapy space. This is a space where you really, like, change is about to take place, right? And you have to be comfortable, right? So Dr. Chanda, what advice or what things do people want to look for or should look for when looking for a therapist, and when they're looking for a therapist that doesn't look like them?
Yeah, such a great question. I think when we think about the term like culturally competent, it's important to identify like, okay, what is culture? Because we often go straight into like race and ethnicity, being Black, white, Hispanic, etc. But there are other things that goes into culture, right? So your age can go into culture. So maybe you want someone who can definitely hit on points that are relevant to your age, the different stages that you are in life. Socioeconomic status is culture. Education level is culture. So it's more than just looking at that person's race and their background, but also looking at those things that are important to you in therapy that you may want to address, that that person can target. I had plenty of people who were Black who came into therapy who said, you know what, I think you just might be too young for me, Dr. Chanda. You're great, but I want somebody who's a little bit older. And that's fine. Like, I wouldn't get offended over that. But that's just that person knowing cultural aspects that they want to target, that they want to hit on, so that they can progress in therapy, and looking at culture from a global perspective, as opposed to having that narrow view of what culture is. So when looking at culture, we want to look at those various domains within culture, and you want to also look at the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities of the individual. So that is essentially what competence is: knowledge, skills, and ability. Does this person have the knowledge related to the things that I want to target? Does this person have the skill set and the training? Unfortunately, in the behavioral health field, like, we tend to assume that these individuals should be competent in a lot of areas. But I mean, I sat in a lot of meetings and I just kind of gave people the side eye, like, did you really just say that about this group of people? So all therapists are not competent. I'm sure you have. And
I've been in those rooms and I'm looking,
girl.
Okay.
And honestly, that's one of the reasons why we must keep pushing this agenda.
Yes.
Because a lot of people do assume that all therapists are competent, they're great, they know everything, and that's just not the case. That's not the case. We got to own it, and we got to start really pushing those who do.
And so I loved all of that, right? But in addition to, like you said, like having that skill set or what have you, just having just having the push to want to get to know that person, right? Because you're coming to that room, right, with your own set of beliefs, your own values, ideas. So you want a therapist that is interested. Like, you want them to ask certain questions about your background. You want them to ask about, well, how's your, like your home, your home, and how you're living, and talk about, like, is where you're currently living, is that impacting some of the trauma that you have going on, right? You want them to be wanting to be involved in that. You want them to be interested in knowing what makes you.
Exactly. And if you feel like you don't have that kind of somebody, if you feel like they're not interested in those specific areas, again, that's no reason to be discouraged. It just means that might not be the therapist for you, and that's okay. Keep shopping for one, keep looking for one who fits your interests, who you connect with.
And we kind of just touched on them a little bit already, because we talked about what cultural competent means, right? Or cultural competent. But I guess, what are some maybe 3 or 4 clear things that you can identify, Dr. Chanda, of like knowing if this therapist is culturally competent?
Yeah. So when speaking of like racial competence, racial sensitivity, it's important to ask the other therapist, that person that you're interviewing, because all clients should be interviewing their therapist before they start therapy. So in that interview process, asking them questions like, okay, what are your beliefs about, Black lives in this country? What are your beliefs about what has been happening over the past year or centuries, if we want to be blunt? Asking those types of questions, asking, what types of racially competent services or techniques do you offer? Do you offer things that are specialized to individuals of the African diaspora, or is that something you don't specialize in? Someone who do specialize in that. Asking those really specific questions, even related to their values, like what's something you value as a person? Because it's really important to have a therapist whose values align with yours. If I have a therapist for myself who doesn't necessarily, faith and spirituality are very important to me. If faith and spirituality isn't important to them, and I come into the therapy room with an issue related to my faith or spirituality or something that happened to me related in those realms, they might not be able to understand where I'm coming from because it's not a value of theirs. Right. So it's really important for us to kind of like assess, like, okay, what values do you have? And just kind of like taking it from there, taking the conversation from there.
Absolutely. I love what you said, because it's one thing that I definitely promote. And I think people that are looking for a therapist may sometimes get intimidated, or they just assume like, well, they're up here, so they're up on this directory, they're good. Mm-hmm. But interviewing your therapist and asking them specific questions, especially like, hey, like you said, what are some of the values? What do you think about maybe this event? Like, what do you think about race and injustices and things of that nature? Right. That's extremely important. And I think a lot of people do not take the time to interview their therapist just because I think they just feel like they're going to automatically get it. And that's not always the case. You see maybe, their degrees hanging up behind them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a good fit.
Right. And they could be a great therapist, very well trained, lots of experience, went to the top school, but they might not be the best therapist for you. And that's okay. Yes. It's just about finding that out. Yeah.
I've been in, like you said, I've been in rooms where I've heard certain therapists speaking before. And like you said, some of the things I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. Sorry if you hear my son. But yeah, I've been in certain rooms, and when you hear that stuff, it's like, wow. Well, if you're saying this kind of outside of the therapy room, I'm wondering what's going on in the room, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and the fact that you feel so emboldened to say it out loud, like, imagine what else you got going on in that head. But
so let me ask you this, Dr. Chanda, what are things that what are some red flags for people that they should be aware of when seeking a therapist? Like, what are some things they should notice or pay attention to and know right off the bat this isn't a good fit for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Asking those questions and they don't necessarily have clear answers to, we'll find that when people don't necessarily have like a clear answer about race, social injustice, things that impact us, like socioeconomic status, like all those things, and it's not something that they really thought about, therefore they don't have a clear answer, that's a clear indication that's not something that's important to that person.
Absolutely.
Right? Absolutely. If it's something that's not important to you, you're not going to think about it on a day-to-day basis. If it's something that doesn't impact, or you feel like it doesn't impact you, you're not going to consider it beyond your scope of who you are and things that impact your family. So I would definitely stay on the lookout for that. And also, I'm a really huge, what's the opposite of a fan? I don't know. I don't want to say hate. I don't know either. I don't want to say hate, but I strongly dislike therapists who say I'm competent in this area. Like, that's got to be so arrogant. That is so arrogant. Who can say that they have all the knowledge, all the skills, and all the abilities related to race and social injustice and all these things? Like, is that not, does that not sound like supremacy in a sense? Like, how can we?
And let's be clear, like you said, it's a continuum, right? So there's not a start. It's not a stop and start. It's like, you're going to continue with this.
I can't tell you how many unmelanated therapists I done heard say, oh yeah, I'm culturally competent. How, Sway? Like how do you, what gives you the ability? Is that not the definition of white supremacy? You thinking that you have all the knowledge related to somebody else's racial experience. So that's a red flag for me. I don't know about the rest of you guys who are watching this, but stay on the lookout for people who say they are culturally competent. But ask them what they think about it. But in my opinion, I would say far away from therapists like that.
I like that you said that. So now that's definitely going to be a red flag that people will acknowledge. It's funny. Yeah. I posted on social media a while ago and I said, I'll have to be honest, right? I don't care what type of person or therapist you are. When you say the major red flag is, oh, I don't see color. You don't? Like you said in your words, how, Sway? How not?
Right.
Because
right.
Someone says that.
That's dangerous.
Woo, child. When someone says that, you miss the whole person. That means you literally do not see me. You don't see my experiences. You don't see the things and the challenges that I've been through. You don't see the breakthroughs that I went through and why I went through them and why they are important and impactful to how I'm living my life. You don't see my resiliency. Child, you don't see me. You don't see me. That means you can't help me in session.
Because your race is a part of your identity. So when with you saying that you don't see race, you don't see color, you don't see culture, you're saying you don't see my identity, the things that I bring into the room. So why would I trust somebody to provide me with some sort of skill or whatever if you don't even see me? You don't see what I've experienced in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I want to say this, Dr. Chanda, what is possibly, let's give a couple of ways of how people can find a therapist, because I definitely think mental health is being talked about a lot more. It's being broadcasted on social media. It's being on radio shows, on TV, or the TV screens, right? So we are talking about it more. How can people find a therapist?
That's a great question. Well, you can start by going through your insurance company and asking them like what therapists are in my network and kind of just doing a search that way. That'll help you to kind of narrow your scope into therapists who accept your insurance, who will be compensated when you do go in. Also, there are directories for Black and Brown therapists, like Black and Brown Therapists of Delaware, Minds of the Culture, my app that has therapists on it, Therapy for Black Girls. Like, it's a lot of different therapist directories out there, but a lot of people just don't know about it. They don't know where to look or how to seek for it. So just looking up those directories will be really important. And also acknowledging the fact that, you know, there are people within your community who might have resources as well, but sometimes because we're not aware of it, we may not know who to ask, right? So think about like the local church. Sometimes churches have a list of therapists in their area. Sometimes hospitals, your primary care physician might have a list of therapists who they work with. Schools, if you're in a school, they might have an emotions coach or a therapist who works with that school. And so it's just about utilizing the resources that are within your support network and really asking them like, okay, what resources do you have for me?
I love that. I love all of that. And so you guys, you have learned today about, again, where to find a therapist. You know what red flags to look for. You know what cultural competence is. And you also are able to understand the importance of finding a therapist that does look like you, right? Before we end, I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Chanda, who just passed her exam. So, Dr. Chanda, I am just so proud. I am so excited.
Thank you.
You are part of, you're going to increase this percentage of Black and Brown psychologists in this field. And I'm just super, super excited.
Thank you so much.
I always tell you that, like, I'm just super excited and really look at you as motivation. So I'm so excited for you.
Same for you, sis. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really do. It's been a long journey. Glad that it's over.
Yeah. And so for everybody that's watching and will watch, I am going to put Dr. Chanda's information in the chat box. So you'll have that where you know where to reach her. And just, you know, just for people that may not read the comments, how can people find you, Dr. Chanda?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at paging.dr.chanda. You can also follow my Instagram page, Minds of the Culture, all one word. In addition to that, you can search me on YouTube, Dr. Chanda Speaks. You can sign up to my email list. LinkedIn, like basically any platform that's a platform, I'm on there. Just search Chanda Reynolds.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you for getting on here talking about how to find a therapist, what cultural competence is. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, Krista. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Bye. You guys, I had the pleasure and the honor of chatting with Dr. Chanda, and I hope you continue to, tune in for the different topics that I'm going to be talking about for the rest of this month. Again, because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, I will be chatting with some professionals next week. I have a psychiatrist that she's going to be talking about medication and the importance of medication. And I'm also going to be sharing talking to people, sharing their personal story and their challenges with mental health and how they overcame some of their challenges that they were facing. Again, this is What's the 411 on Black Mental Health. You can follow me at BBDT_directory, and that's on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So I'll see you all next week. Bye.